Hey guys, welcome back. This is History of Futurama Season 2, Episode 7 of my show, which is also going to be about Episode 7. Now, Episode 7 is known as Ahead in the Polls, but before I start talking about it, I just want to mention two little things. The reason why it's called that is because of what's going to happen with Bender's body and stuff, and one of the characters, one of the head with all the body characters is gonna get it from the pawn shop. I just wanted to explain that part of it. I'm not gonna explain who the character is until I get to that. I just wanted to mention it though. Anyway, now getting back into what I was saying before, this episode is season 2, episode 7, which is also about episode 7, which is called Ahead in the Polls. Now, basically, what happens is, the way this episode starts off is Fry and Bender are basically watching this TV program called The Scary Door, which is, I think, this series' version of the Twilight Zone kind of thing, and basically they show this scene where this guy's the last person on the planet, and he's all alone to reading, and then his body parts start falling off. When first his glasses fall out, and he starts saying that it's not fair. Well, because he has eternal solitude with his books, to read books for all eternity because of that. But his glasses fall off, and then he says that it's not fair. But then he realizes that his eyesight's not that bad, so he can just read the large print books. But then his eyes fall out, and then he does that same thing again, but he says that luckily he knows how to read Braille. But then his hands fall off his body, and then basically his mouth, after he screams, falls off it, and then Fry and Bender, when they're watching the show, are getting kind of a little bit disgusted by it, and then Bender's like, cursed by his own hubris. And then Leela comes running in and telling them that they change the channel because there's a political debate. Oh, crud. Hold on. Hello? Hey, Gerald, I don't mean to be mean when I say this, but can you call back later? I'm recording a video right now. You can call me back later after I'm done recording, okay, bud? I'm really sorry about this. We can talk more after I finish recording and while the video's uploading. You can call me back. I'll talk to you afterward, bud, okay? And again, my apologies about this. Bye-bye. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, after Leela changes the channel to the political debate, well, basically what happens, hold on, is after she mentions about the political debate, Bender's like, hey, that's what Fry said when we turned on the debate. Because they turned on the debate, but they changed the channel because they didn't want to watch it because it was boring. And Leela changed it back again to the channel, and then they started falling asleep. because they were bored with it, and then basically Leela tells them that basically she knows that there are no car chases, but this is important because one of them is about to become the president of the world, and then Fry makes a sort of a I guess you could kind of think of it as a sort of snarky remark. Because he's an idiot as well, because he said that what do they care, they live in the United States, and then basically Leela said that the United States is part of the world, which is true, because the United States of America is just one of the places on this planet which is a part of the world, so of course it also affects them, so it makes sense. It's common knowledge is what it is. That's what I'm getting at with it. Anyway, after that, Fry says that he has been gone a long time. No, he's attributing that to the fact that he's been frozen because he thinks the United States became part of the world after that point, which is not true. It's always been a part of the world. He's just an idiot character. Anyway, basically they watched a TV program, and then it's basically the debate between the two candidates for the presidency. One guy named Jack Johnson and the other guy known as John Jackson. And then basically after Fry sees them and then they start agreeing on some points, he wonders if they're clones. Like, he's like, these are the candidates? They look like clones. And then he looks a little closer and then he says that, wait a minute, they are clones. But Leela tells him to not be fooled by their similar appearances because they differ on some key issues. And just as she says that, they start differing on a 3-cent titanium tax. One of the clones mentions that his opponent's 3-cent titanium tax goes too far, and the other one says that his opponent's 3-cent titanium tax doesn't go far enough. And then after that, the news basically interrupts the presidential debate to bring them this update on an incident in this episode that happened, which is basically a titanium mine that collapses. And Bender's asleep because he's asleep at first because I think it's because of the actually that part of it with that doesn't actually happen yet, but basically Leela takes Fry and to get himself registered to vote after finding out that he is not registered to vote and stuff. And then after they get registered to vote, basically what happens is they come back, and then Fry says that he's starting to understand politics, but Leela turns the TV on and he falls asleep again. I don't know if it's because of the politics, but I think it's just a natural instinct he has to sometimes fall asleep when he's bored, which is a normal thing for any human to do, to fall asleep when they get bored from time to time. But again, this leads into what I was saying earlier. I sort of skipped ahead to this before. I just wanted to backtrack to that. Anyway, while they're doing the voting for the thing, what happens is the news interrupts them in this episode to mention about a tragic incident that's happened, which is basically a titanium mine on a planet totally collapsing and trapping a different amount, like a large amount of robot workers, and then Bender's asleep, but when he hears that part, he sort of wakes up and his visor goes over top of himself, and he's like, Lord of mercy! And then basically the human reporter, which is Linda, basically explains, she asks the foreman what their plan is for getting the robots out, and the man that she's talking to in the newscast says that his plan is to just pave over the mine and get on with the rest of their lives, so he's ignoring the fact that the robots are trapped. And essentially he wants to forget about it, which in honesty, it's a kind of I think it's bad practice, but it's also a sense of that. And then basically Morbo says that basically the news of the mines closing sent titanium prices skyrocketing. And then when Bender hears that, he's like, alright, I'm rich. And then Leela's wondering why he's rich. And then he says the reason why is because his body is 40% titanium. And he's finally richer than all those snooty ATM machines. Oh my god. And then basically what happens is, oh, I'm sorry, that's hilarious though. Although in retrospect, in a robot sense, it does make sense for him to think about an ATM being a snooty machine because of the fact that, well, an ATM is a machine that dispenses money, so it has a lot of money in it, so it makes sense from a technical robot standpoint, I mean. Anyway, basically what happens is, Bender basically goes on a selling spree after that, and then basically what happens is he later then sells his body, and then basically at this pawn shop. Now him selling his body at the pawn shop is actually gonna play a hand in sort of the rest of this episode up until this point. What I mean by that is, it's gonna play a hand in the storyline of the rest of the episode until the ending segment of it. And then after he basically sells his body at the pawn shop, what happens is he's insulting the people that are there, telling them to compare their lives and they kill themselves. And then a dog comes walking by his head, and he's like, go away, shoo. I'll give you $5 to not do what you're thinking of doing. And by that, Bender is referring because he knows what the dog is going to do. And the dog does it, which is peeing on him. And then he's like, you just lost $5. And then basically what happens is, after that, Bender is wanting someone to help him get to his office, get to the Planet Express building, because he doesn't have a body anymore because he sold it. So he's just a head without a robot head without a robot body. So he has a person on the street to kick him so that he can get to the Planet Express building. And then after the person kicks him, he's like, thank you. And then basically he ends up in the Planet Express building after going through the window, which is open. And then Fry wonders what up with Bender. He looks up and has he been working out, and then basically Bender says no, he sold his body. And then when the professor hears that he's like selling his body after he hears that the professor says that Bender sold his body, and then he's like, after the professor realizes that Bender sold his body, he's like, he knows that it's glamorous and you get the parties and stuff like that, but it always ends up hurting him in the long run, which in a sense is kind of true, because Bender was rich because of his body being 40% titanium, and he sold it. Now, him selling his body, again, like I said before, it's going to play a hand in the rest of the episode. But in two instances, what I mean by two instances is, I'm going to explain what those two instances are when I get to them. What happens after that, Bender is causing some mischief because he's a head with a body now, and then basically he goes in on his car, and then basically Fry's wondering if he can come with him in the car, and then Bender makes a joke about that, and he says that maybe if you cleaned up first, it looks like your head got stuck on something. And then he's, oh, I'm sorry, that's just your body. Oh my god. And then basically what happens after that is, after Bender gets fed up with them, he tells them that he's off to the head museum to be with other heads like him who enjoy the classier things. And after naming what some of them are, he drives his car off. But before he drives his little mini car off, he's like, so long, coffin stuffers. But as he's driving, he crashes his little mini car, so that's when he, ironically, is like, could one of you coffin stuffers please carry me? And then so they carry him to the head museum, and then he ends up in the Hall of U.S. Presidents. He decides to spend his time as a head in the Hall of U.S. Presidents, and then basically after Fry sees one of the former president's heads, he's like, hey, I was gonna vote for you one time, but voting isn't cool, so I just decided to stay on instead. And then basically the head of Bill Clinton is like, hey, after he sees Leela, he's like, hey, you know, legally, nothing I can do counts as sex anyone. And one of the other president's heads is like, I apologize for that, ma'am. He gets that way over meaty-looking women. And then basically, Bender, who's with George Bush's head at this point, tells them a joke. Bender tells the head of George Bush a joke where he says that, and the guy says, that's not his in-ring, and then he says that his friend says, that's not my solid gold connector. And then the head of George Washington laughs, and then he tells Bender in his own little um, American accent, old-timey American accent. Like, he's like, "Oh, Bender, thou dost cracketh me up," which is basically his way of saying that Bender cracks him up by when he tells him that joke. And then, while they're in the head museum, what happens is, basically, then it goes to the scene where some of the heads are in the closet, and one of them that is Bob Dole is like, Bob Dole needs. This is actually pretty funny because what happens is some of the heads are in a closet, on a shelf in a closet, I guess because there's not enough room for all the president's heads in that area, and one of the heads there is the head of the guy named Bob Dole, and then he's like, Bob Dole needs company. Larish won't stop with the knock jokes. And then the head of former President Nixon shows up, and then basically, well, he's one of the heads there, and then after that, basically Bender asks Nixon if, even though he mixes his body, being a head's a pretty good thing too, right? But Nixon says that it's not, and then he says something about it's a hard life, and then basically Bender gets upset by that because he's like, "No, you tell me." And then basically Nixon takes that seriously, and he's like, "That's my style. I like to kick them when they're down." And then and then basically after that, what happens is in the next scene, Bender is sleeping in his apartment on a pillow because he can't sleep in the normal way with his apartment because of the fact of him selling his body. And then he has this nightmare where he keeps seeing the numbers 1 and 0 over and over again. And then he gets so frightened by that he screams and wakes Fry up. And then basically, after telling Fry about the nightmare, and he realizes what the nightmare was about, his body loved him and he abandoned it. So he tells his body to tie ribbon around him because he's coming back to get him. But when he goes back to the pawn shop to ask the guy for his body back, the owner of the pawn shop tells him that he already sold his body, and he's like, "You sold my body to who?" And then he says that he can't divulge that information, but he says that Bender seems like a nice robot, so he tries to make a deal with him to. And then basically, Bender, Fry, and Leela are back at the Planet Express building, and then they're watching this newscast, and then Richard Nixon, who was one of the heads in the series that was in the head museum, announces that he's announcing his candidacy for the presidency of Earth, allowing himself to be back in the putting himself in the ring for the presidency of the planet Earth. And then one of the reporters says that some law states that no nobody who's ever ran for president before can be able to run twice. And then Nixon says that's true, nobody, but he says that he's got as they can see, he's got a new body. And then basically that's when they realized that Nixon was the one that bought Bender's body. And then Bender gets agitated with that because he's like, that dirty double-crossing bastard, how dare he run off with Richard Nixon? And then basically in the next scene, Leela says that Nixon must have bought Bender's body from the pawn shop. And then Fry says that it looks good on him. And then basically what happens is he starts playing his guitar. And then basically after that, he says that he's not a crook's-head, but Bender says that he is, because he stole his body. And then basically what happens is after that, he asks Fry and Leela to help him get his body back. Now Leela, under normal circumstances, will refuse because she's like, she said that ordinarily she'd say no and lecture him about how it's his own fault for doing something stupid. But when a robotic Nixon is on the loose, they have a duty to stop it no matter what. And then basically what happens is they use these black suits that are commonly used for people for sneaking into buildings to do certain things. And then Fry asks Leela why she thinks that Nixon will be at the motel. And then basically Leela explains that the reason he's at the motel is because they give people a discount if they've been there before. And then basically they start climbing up this rope after the rope that has a robotic thing attached to it, attaches to a pipe. And then Bender climbs up the rope while he's attached to Fry in the back that Fry put his head in. And then basically he sees these people, and then basically he tells them to get a room. And then the man says that they are already in a room while they lose some weight. And then basically what happens is they manage to get into the suite that has Richard Nixon in it, and then they start quietly looking around for him. And then basically they manage to find him, but as Leela's starting to unscrew Nixon's head from Bender's body, Fry accidentally comes upon this bed that has these things called magic tentacles, which can be activated. But here's the thing, the magic tentacles in the episode, they're actually activated by thought. So when Fry thought he accidentally activated them, which causes the tentacles to whip him around the apartment, which then causes Nixon to realize what they're doing. But this was after Leela was able to get Nixon's head off Bender's body. And then it was while Leela was unscrewing Nixon's head from his body. And then basically what happens is after that, Nixon explains to them what his plan is for once he becomes president. And then basically he tells them that once he's elected into office, children's organs, the zoos for meat, and then and I'll go into people's houses at night and wreck up the place. And then he does this laugh, and then basically, but before that part of it, he actually, mentions about how computers may be faster than they were back in 1973 when he was around, but the average voter is still, a dumb, useless person. And then he's like, and then he said that the years have made him sour, it's crazy even. And then he said that once he's elected into office, he'll sell children's organs to zoos for me, and then he says it with a laugh, he's like, and I'll go into people's houses at night and work up the place. And then he does this laugh, and then basically, oh, before I continue, I should mention something. When they were back dealing with getting the voting thing, Bender mentioned that he was not allowed to vote. Now, Fry basically explained that he wondered the reason why he wasn't allowed to vote was because he was a robot, but the real reason he wasn't allowed to vote was because he's a convicted felon, so that's the reason he can't vote. I just wanted to backtrack to there because I missed it, and I figured I'd bring it up since I'm getting close to the end of the episode. And then after Fry hears that part from Nixon, he's like, well, he lost my vote. And then Nixon mentions that, like, one vote ever made a difference, which technically it does, because it's also explained by Leela that the first robot president won by exactly one vote. But Nixon then mentions that if they'll excuse him, he's gonna inch himself closer to the phone and call the police. But then Bender's like, not so fast, Nixon. Do you know any... Do you ever hear of audio tape? And then Bender rewinds himself, and then basically after Nixon hears that, he's like, uh-oh, I don't like where this is going. And then Nixon's recording plays on Bender's mouth, and then in the recording he's like, and I'll go into people's houses at night and wreck up the place. And then when Nixon hears that on recording of himself, he gets shocked by it because he's like, my God, I sound like that? I always thought my voice had a Clark Gable quality. And then basically, Leela takes the tape out of Bender's mouth, and she tells them that they'll exchange the tape. They'll trade him the tape for Bender's body in it, so he agrees to it. And then basically what happens is, after that, they're watching the election on TV again, and then basically the human reporter, which is Linda, I believe is her name, is mentioning something about Nixon being down in the polls. But after that, what happens is she mentions that the robot polling has come in, and then she said that Nixon has won, and then they get surprised by that, and then basically Fry wonders why robots would vote for Nixon when he's now just a head in a jar, and then Bender is like, well, it ain't my fault. I'm a non-voting felon, thank you very much. And then Leela says that, oh crap, she knew she had to do something she forgot to do something. It was technically her fault that got Nixon elected. And then basically, when they do the coronation ceremony, basically what happens is Nixon shows up on this blue giant robot, and then after that, what happens is Morbo, the alien news reporter, which is Morbo in this case, he congratulates the president on the news about president on becoming president of Earth, and then may death rain down upon his enemies. And then Nixon is causing a rampage in the robot suit while going towards where the White House is, and he's like, Nixon's back! And then basically after he gets into the office and causes a little bit of a mess of it, that's basically where this episode stops. So if you guys like this video when I post it, just please give this video the real best you guys can. And I will see you guys later for the next video. So until then, like I always tell you with this series, may the power protect you. Like I always tell you with this series, fun on a bun. Sorry.